the police, I experienced one time I was just walking across the street and they started cursing me out, called
The
me a
police
pussy
did?
and shit. Yeah, the police, they were just riding their bikes. And funny enough, I was in like
Really?
a black polo and like light blue jeans. I looked like a cop. People came up, people on Capitol Hill,
You
people
you
me
probably
going,
you probably look
"You're
like
a cop?"
Antifa.
I feel like I actually looked like a lot like a cop. I don't know. But I was just like walking down the street and they were started cussing me out. It was like,
Really?
yeah, it was crazy. I
That's
also saw, you know, not fought out action from the other side also. And so I think the problem is, of course, both sides are doing that. When's the last time a real conversation has done anything, a real discussion,
right.
a real collaboration of the people where we can say, yeah, you think this, or yeah, you think this, and maybe there are some differences, but we can actually kind of come together
Find a
because
common
even though
ground.
you're on the right, even though you're on the right and I'm on the left, we fucking hate this bird and we want to shoot it down together. Like
Right.
that doesn't happen. And so,
Why do you think that
I'm
is?
not surprised. I think it's baked into the system. Some people say the system isn't working. I think the system is working as designed to support the powers at bay, the big companies, the big powerful people, the deep state that has maintained power for a long time.
But I
Somewhat
mean,
maybe ill-willed, somewhat maybe not. And there's enough money perpetuated in the media. I mean, a good example is why are psychedelics, why is psilocybin illegal?
right.
When there are research studies shown that if you did mushrooms, if you did mushrooms or microdosed acid or something like that, it could treat anxiety, depression for a year. 1 or 2 doses could.
Sure.
Tons of studies on that versus, okay, but we're going to actually push these pills. You got to take one a day for the rest of you. Well, of course,
Right,
it's
right.
profit. It's like not a hard question to answer. And I think that type of suppression of truth and what's best for people exists in a lot of places where profit supersedes to the elite.
So our system is obviously a capitalist system. Uh, in Colombia, is it more of a communist vibe or what's going on there?
Definitely not. And Venezuela is like next door,
Right.
so no one fucks with the word communism over here. Um,
Okay.
I would say it's pretty similar. There's just a different type of corruption, right? Like no one here is afraid necessarily of getting beat up by the police, except for with these protests. I've seen some pretty horrific things, but the cops are definitely corrupt. Like cops will come up to you for no reason and make you pay them off for kind of nothing, right? Like that's the kind of corruption that the police have here, and so um, yeah, it just depends, man. Like, but yeah, it's still capitalist. It's just an impoverished capitalist. It's not like first world. You wouldn't know that if you're in Medellin necessarily or Bogota. It feels very first world. There's a lot of tech and that kind of thing, but
Right.
their peso is not strong against the dollar, um, and so that's the interesting thing about this protest. You see the left, the right, and the indigenous all coming together to protest this government.
Hmm.
Fascinating. But the people have less power here than they do in the US, or at least visibly so. Maybe we think we
Right.
have more power than we do in the US, but we're deceived.
Well, because what I find interesting is, for those who don't know, I was born in Kenya, grew up in Brazil, and then I moved to the United States 2002. And you're actually one of my first friends, as far as real friends that I met, started hanging out with, and we started so way back in the day. What I find interesting here is, especially coming from the same type of people who have been doing these protests and being part of these movements in the last year or plus, it seems like it's almost cool to hate on the United States right now.
Sure.
And I wonder at what point did we get to this point? Because oftentimes I've heard a lot of people here in the United States, often coming from the left, um, putting up arguments that we'd be better off being a communist country with communist ideas and more communist rules. And often they don't even say communism. They just state how they would like things to be, and they just so happen to describe a communist system.
Sure.
I guess I can say that I know capitalism is not perfect by any means, but so far, I don't think we've been able to come up with a system that is more efficient and actually provides the higher quality lifestyle for the most amount of people other than capitalism.
Sure. I don't think full blown communism obviously unless you want to live on a very small commune where everyone is consenting to it. But here's my issue with government in general is you are born into a non-consensual relationship with how things are run,
Right.
which is fascinating. And truly, you don't have a choice on whether you consent or not. That is fascinating to so many aspects of it, right?
Mhm.
So I think that dynamic creates a really interesting point to where if you really feel like I don't consent to this, you grasp for something else, right? A lot of Americans don't really understand the history of government in other countries. As someone who's traveled quite a bit and had a lot of political conversations with people from other countries, like the other countries kind of shit on America, but they all, I mean, everyone, government is kind of a fucked up thing. Like it's kind of a
Right.
fucked up thing. It's people who we elect who are supposed to represent our voice that end up being influenced by everything besides our voice. Like that's kind of like the last thing that influences them. Um, I mean, they'll say it does until they get in there. Joe Biden, after Trump, is an interesting example, and every
Yeah.
politician does this. Trump did it
Yeah.
too. Joe Biden saying he'd end the forever wars, and he would, you know, not cool with what Saudi Arabia is doing, and then essentially chilling on that, like,
That
and
guy,
every politician's
dude.
done it. Like, I'm not shitting on Joe Biden any more than I'm shitting on the Republicans or I'm shitting on whoever, man.
Yeah.
Like, it's the system, the way that it's built, and so each country has like issues with its government. At least most of the ones I've seen. Greece has had a really interesting run with Varoufakis. I think I'm saying his
Yeah,
name
they
wrong.
they have been in a roller coaster. I
That's
mean,
interesting. Brazil is fascinating. Just people
yeah.
who've had kind of countercultural things go on. But so I think, but here's what I'll say about capitalism. I think capitalism is a part of whatever system you have, whether you call it government or if it's an alternative system. I think obviously the economic state has to exist. And I think that has to come secondarily to the idea of liberty, though. And in our government currently, economy and the economic state of the country, and especially the powerful, seems to supersede liberty, right? And so, for example, I bring up the psychedelic, we can just stay on that example. We do
Yeah,
not
let's
have
dive
the
in.
choice. We don't have the choice to choose what medicine we think is best for us or to
Right.
consult other types of medicine people. We're actually suppressed because of capitalism. We are being suppressed of our freedoms and our liberties to choose, right? Fascinating concept. So yes, I think capitalism to some extent needs to exist. There's libertarian capitalist kind of ideas that I think make sense. I'm more floating around the anarchist. I know that's going to trigger a lot of people. Go read
The
Accidental
what?
Anarchy. And
Yeah.
a book I'll recommend is Accidental Anarchists by a guy named Karn Ross.
Okay. I'll check it
And
out.
or Ross Karn, I forget. He was a British diplomat during the Iraq War, saw the Western powers that be choose war first. Like there were other options. He was there. He was like lead foreign counsel, I believe, for the UK and advised the US, I believe. And he saw war be the first option. Where, I mean, by definition, in the rules of war, it should be the last choice, right? Like it should be
Right.
the last option that you have. But in some sort of kind of nationalistic, and I would consider myself a patriot. I love my country, but definitely not a nationalist. Like because I'm born here doesn't mean I think that this country matters more than this country. It just happens to be
Sure.
where I'm from. And so pushing that agenda as the primary agenda, because obviously war is good for business and good for the economy. Things like that, where governments are allowed to make moral decisions that we back that an individual would be thrown in prison for. And so that kind of duplicitous just sense of morality, I
Double
think it just
standard.
is complete double standard. It's hypocritical, and we let it happen. We actually support it at times. And so
Sure.
I
In the
think the
name
system
of
in itself
security,
is the
right?
thing.
In the name of safety and security.
Yeah, and I don't think I think a lot of the times with these wars, we're definitely not getting the truth on what's going
No,
on. Um,
that's for sure.
CIA is
I
shady.
mean,
AF,
I
Mossad,
I don't
Mobat,
think
yeah,
war is an option ever, even as a last resort. In my opinion, that doesn't even make it to any of my top choices.
right.
That is just simply out the window. Violence to me is absolutely not okay. I don't care where you're coming from. I don't care what your argument is.
All right, thanks for watching this clip from Appropriate Culture. If you want to watch the full episode, go ahead and check out us at appropriateculture.com. You can also check us out on social media platforms at Appropriate Culture. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you guys on the next one.